Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another study of this week's portion. As it has been in the past, this week is loaded with many stories and lots of commentaries and lessons. I would like to share with you about one particular part of this week's portion that is extremely relevant to our situation in our day and time. Recently, there have been several researchers that prove that countries who are led by women were able to fight the virus and fare a lot better than countries where men were leading. I'm not playing politics and I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for. But these are researches that were done here in this country, in Europe, and in Israel. They found that countries whom leaders were women, the prime minister, the president, the leader, were able to conclude or finish the waves earlier. They had less deaths. They had less people who are total number of people who were affected, and less people were severely impacted by the disease. One of the explanations given is that the leaders, men, care more about the economy. Women care about health and the well-being of people. Thus, they were willing to sacrifice the economy as long as they are able to help more people survive. In Israel, a research that was published just about a couple of days ago published that about a study that was done about 10 leaders. 5 are male and 5 are female, about how they dealt with the corona as leaders of countries. They discovered that the women were much more open the way they spoke. They were much more honest, and their body language was much different than the men. The men, their body language was threatening. They use warnings and scary tactics to protect their country. They are very aggressive, and their language was about trying to force their point of view on the people. Where when it came to the women, they spoke publicly in a very comfortable tone and words. They remove all the tension. They try to alleviate any tension. They were speaking out of empathy, caring, and being optimistic. They were speaking about in the theme of let's work together. If we unite, we will be able to overcome. And they remove the scare, the frightening factor of the disease from their population. I share that with you in details because it is so powerful, especially taking into account that in the past, women would try to adapt the language of men. They try to be strong and harsh. You know, Margaret Thatcher, who is known as I know in Hebrew you call it the Iron Woman or the Iron Lady. In Israel, the first Prime Minister, Golda Meir, was known as a very harsh person that was able to speak like a man and rebuke and criticize, etc. But this time, for the first opportunity that we have where this is a pandemic that affects the entire universe, and we are able to compare countries to each other at the same time. Suddenly we discovered that when the women did not adopt the men's style, but actually took the natural way of speaking, leading, expressing themselves, their countries fared much, much better and did a lot better when it comes to the virus. In few words, they were victorious, they won. In Judaism, this is no secret, especially if you listen to me talk. I believe that the women has a much greater power than men when it comes to convincing and leading. And that's why the house in the Jewish tradition is led by the women. Whatever she says goes. That's why the education of the children is entrusted with the women. And finally, we will see in this week's portion how powerfully the women's power is playing out. In this week's portion, we read of a very difficult situation. It's very difficult for me to get into details, but in this week, I figured I've spent a long time this afternoon until now. I've been sitting and studying and preparing so I can talk about it for hours. And the topic of the women's power of persuasion and convincing. After that, we have other topics within the same story. So we have a story. I'm going to give you a short introduction and tell you the page and the chapter, and then we'll go in to discover some gems. This week's portion, Jacob finally made peace with his father-in-law. They made a covenant not to hurt each other and not to fight, and he's going back home. On the way, before he crosses the border, we read about Jacob is sending gifts to his brother who was trying to take revenge and kill him. And he's sending lots of animals. He's also praying to God to save him, and he's preparing himself to fight. We read that at night he is alone in his area. He had to go back for a small jogs, which need to be understood. He crossed the river. He was alone. A minister of God, an angel, came to fight him, and they were fighting each other the whole night until the morning. Finally, the man blesses them, changes it, gives them a new name, and let them go. And now Jacob is going to meet Esau. He met Esau, and instead of fighting each other, they hugged and kissed each other. And Esau is offered protection. Jacob is not unwanted. Esau goes back home to Seir, to his homeland. And Jacob is moving on with his family and great wealth. Slowly, he comes to a town called Shechem. Shechem is today, as we know it, as Nablus. So the first thing he does is he purchased a large piece of land. He fenced it out, and he's going to build himself homes and huts and sheds for the animals. And he's going to be there for a little while. As he arrives there, we read in the Torah, and this is where our story takes us. We read about in this week's portion, starting as if you have our Chumash, you find it on page 225, and it starts chapter 34, verse 1. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out to observe the daughters of the land. Shechem, the son of Hamor, the leader of the country of the place, saw her and desired her, and he kidnaps her, he rapes her, abuses her, and then he wants to marry her. He fell in love with her. She was an outsider. She was very beautiful, and he wants to marry her. So Jacob, we read, this is, I'm not going to read to you the text one line at a time because it will take too long, but you can read, it's an entire chapter. I'm giving you the summary. Hamor is the father of Shem, of his son. He goes to Jacob, and he's trying to convince him to allow his son to marry Dinah. Jacob heard about that. He's extremely angry, but he keeps quiet because his children were shepherds. They were far away with the animals. They don't come home every night. It takes them, they come home every couple of days. So Jacob says, let's wait for the children to arrive. When the brothers of Dinah arrives, 11 brothers, they find out what exactly happened and they are extremely furious. Then Shem and Hamor, this father and son, approached them again and asked them if it's possible for their sister to marry this young man, and he will give them as much money as they want, and they'll do business and they'll marry the families, etc. However, the children of Jacob turned to Shem and Hamor and they said to them, we are Jewish. And the only way to recognize someone who is Jewish is someone who is circumcised. That's the only mitzvah God gave Abraham. So anyone who wants to marry our family must be circumcised. And Shem and Hamor is eagerly willing to be circumcised, but they go out and convince their entire town that it pays off to circumcise so that we are able to connect with that family, the very wealthy family. It will be financially beneficial to all. It will have families marrying each other. It's a win-win situation. We then read about them getting circumcised, the entire town. The end result, if we have time, we will concentrate on the second half. Simeon and Levi, Shimon and Levi, the two brothers of Dinah, go out on the third day of the circumcision and they murder the entire town. And Jacob is upset and they answer back to Jacob. This is again a whole topic that we can talk if we have time. I want to go back to that story about circumcising. An adult getting circumcised is not like a child. We had an experience with some Russian immigrants. We needed to circumcise an adult, and it involved a anesthesia, local anesthesia, and it involved a lot of prep beforehand and afterwards. It was an ordeal. This is not such a simple thing, and it's very painful. One can ask, I understand Shem and Hamor, the son and father, we know that men will do whatever it takes. They will go to the other side of the universe if they fall in love with a girl. They will do whatever. And his father, the Torah testified that this son was very spoiled and he got everything he asked for. So we can understand the father agreeing for the sake of the happiness of his son to be circumcised. But one can ask, what's going on with the entire town? How is it possible the entire town is willing to circumcise? We don't find that they were getting paid for it. We don't find that they had any immediate reward for it. What is it that made them agree to being circumcised? The Lubavitch Rebbe asked this question, and the following is the Rebbe's explanation. The Rebbe said that if you read earlier, before, the night before he met Esau in this week's portion, it is, you may find it on page 214 or 15 in English, chapter 32, verse 23. We read the following. After he sent out gifts to Esau, we read, during the night he got up and he took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children together with Dinah. we read that he took the 11 children. The commentator asked, where is Dinah? He had a daughter, not just 11 sons. The Torah tells us that he took only the 11 sons. And Rashi tells us that Dinah, he put her in a box and he hid her because he did not want Esau to discover her. Why? And for that he was punished later, that she was abused and raped, because this is Rashi based on Medrash, because Dinah had the power to persuade people to change. Had Esau had seen her and how beautiful she was, he would have been willing to do anything she asked, and she would have changed him to become a righteous man, a very good, kind-hearted person. And because Jacob did not want Esau to see Dinah, he put her in a box. That's why we read that he crossed the river with 11 sons. It doesn't mention anything about the daughter. That's why he was punished. Says the Rebbe, Dinah had the power to change people. And that's why when she comes to a new town, she goes out to see the girls of the town. Some interpret it in a negative way. She was going yenting. But it's not true. She didn't go to have fun and go shopping with them. She went out to try and impact them in a positive way and teach them proper behavior. And that's why when Shem and Hamor are willing to circumcise themselves, Dinah wants them to circumcise because she wants them to convert to becoming Jewish. And she's able to convince the entire town. As the Mother said, she wanted everybody to convert. And she's the one who was able to persuade the entire town to circumcise, even though it involves great pain and suffering. We see from here, I think, as they say, you can't argue with success. Success speaks for itself. We know that today, as I just told you, every single study, and there are several studies that were done, prove that the women have a greater power with empathy and kindness and softness and being honest and optimism. They are able to achieve much far greater than the men. I think it's time for us to learn, us men, from the women. If we want to impact our surrounding, our family, it's time for us to take lessons from the women and not the other way around, because the proof is in the writing. It is clear to everyone who is part of the study or saw the study that following the women's way is actually the key to success. This is the one point that sticks out from this week's portion. I want to talk about one more point and we'll go as far as we can. We read after that Shimon and Levi, these are the sons of Leah, the second and third son, they go out and murder the entire town on the third day of their circumcision. I want to share with you the place where it is in this text if you want to read. I am going to give you a very short, abbreviated summary before we start learning a little more deeper to it. So we read on page 226 in Hebrew, 227 in English, chapter 34, verse 25. We read, and then on the third day, when they were in pain, Yaakov's two sons, Shimon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took each man a sword. They came to the city confidentially, and they killed every male. They left the women and children, but they killed all the men. Then we read that Yaakov discovers what they have done, and Jacob is turning to them and he says, this is on page 229, verse 30. Yaakov said to Shimon and Levi, you have made me troubled, creating hostility between me and the inhabitants in the land, among the Canaanites and among the Perizzites. I am afraid I am only few, and they can gather against me and attack me, and then I and my household will be destroyed. Jacob is very mad on the act, and he rebukes them. How dare you do that? Shimon and Levi are not quiet. They turned back and they said, could we allow them to make our sister like a harlot? And Jacob is not responding to their answer. So we're going to again summarize it, and then we're going to go on to some details. Shimon and Levi goes out on the third day after they've been circumcised, while this is the most painful day of the after circumcision, and they murder every single male. After they have done that, Jacob discovers that and he's angry at them and he rebukes them and he asks, why did you do that? After Jacob says that to them, they turn to him and he says, our daughter, our sister is not like a harlot. She's not available to anybody, and he have abused her, and therefore they deserve to die. Did they deserve to die, the entire town? How about maybe only the father and son who are the culprits? Why were they killing the entire town? Here are two explanations. Maimonides writes that there is a rule, one of the seven Noah laws, one of the seven Noah's law is to appoint judges to rule and to equate and to punish those who misbehave and to reward those who act properly. This town did not appoint judges, and therefore it was allowed for this young man to rape and abuse a girl without paying for it. And therefore, they all are partners in the crime, and that's why they deserve to die. So now Maimonides says that they died, they were killed justly because they did not appoint judges to punish this young man. I am sure the message is how important it is for us to protect the justice system and to prevent from anyone trying to shake the justice system, because it is the foundation for which the society exists. And in Judaism, it is one of the most basic fundamentals for living a life, a sane life. Nachmanides turned to Maimonides. Nachmanides lived around the same time, a little bit after Maimonides, and said, I don't understand. There is a mitzvah to appoint judges, but it doesn't say that if the community don't appoint judges, they are being punished for to die for. Therefore, he says, Nachmanides says, that these people worshipped idols which was forbidden for them from before, and therefore they deserve to die. In other words, their sin is not what they acted or participated or kept quiet for the rape of Dinah, but something that happened way before. They worshipped idols, then that's why they deserve to be punished. Now then you can ask why Jacob was upset. If it was justified either because they did not appoint judges to rule in just, or because they worship idols, we see that Jacob rebukes them and is very unhappy. Says the commentators that Jacob was not actually upset for killing them. This act was justified as mentioned. He was upset because he feared for his life. As he said to them, I am troubled. I am troubled because they are many, the neighboring towns, and we are very few, and they can come and kill us and maim us. So he was not upset about the act, he was upset about the outcome, and they should have consulted him. According to Radvaz, Rabbi David ben Zimra, another very, very famous sage, he turned to them and he says, you know, before they converted, before they were circumcised, they deserved to die for the crime of this young man, and they kept quiet. However, after one is circumcised and converts to Judaism, it is considered as if he became a fresh new start, like a baby that just born. The Torah tells us that a convert who converts to Judaism is considered like a whole new life that starts from the beginning. And therefore he felt, Jacob told them, you should have not done that because they don't deserve to die after they have converted to Judaism. All their past is wiped out. All their past is gone, and there is no need to punish them for their past. The Rebbe goes on a little farther. The Rebbe says that after they responded saying, our sister is not a harlot, we don't find that Jacob answers them back, which means he accepted their answer, and they explain that they wanted to defend their sister. But, says the Rebbe, towards the end of his life, Jacob's end of life, in the portion of Vaychi, and chapter, I wrote it down, chapter 49, verse 6, we find something very interesting, because in chapter 49, suddenly on page, verse 5 and 6 on page 329, Jacob on his deathbed is giving blessings to every one of his sons, except two of them, Shimon and Levi. Actually, not only he does not bless them, he is cursing them. He said to them, as Rashi explained the curse, you have adopted Esau's behavior by using a sword. It is not the proper behavior, and you have done great shame to yourself. And he says, I don't want to be part of you. I want to be distant from you. He's actually not only rebuking, but he's actually cursing them instead of blessing. And this is on his deathbed. So the question is, what happens here? Was it justified? And it seems that it was justified because after they explained, he did not answer back. Or later on, we see that he actually is cursing them for that act, and he's extremely unhappy. Says the Rebbe that actually what happened was when they explained themselves that the act of this young man is totally unacceptable, and therefore they acted quite quickly without thinking. Jacob, their father, accepted their deed, and he accepted that what they did was justified. They said to him that they were very zealot, and as soon as they heard what had happened to their sister, they knew they have to take revenge. And therefore they didn't think straight. Their mind wasn't clear, and therefore they acted so swiftly, and Jacob accepted it. However, later on, and that's when Jacob on his deathbed is cursing them, many years went by, and Shimon and Levi had an opportunity to act in a harsh way again. And this time it was not justified. And that time, I wouldn't guess that you would know it, but I'm sure you heard of the story of Joseph being sold. At first, the brother, when he comes to Shechem, by the way, he goes to the same town. He goes to this town, Nablus, where they were shepherding the flock. They see him from far, and they decide to kill him. Then they decide to throw him into the pit. Then they decide to sell him as a slave we ended up in Egypt. Who are the ones who actually threw him to the pit? Who are the ones who actually sold him as a slave? It was only Shimon and Levi, because the words over there, it says, and they said to one to his brother, and the same exact words are used when we talk about in this week, one to his brother went out with their swords to murder the entire town. In addition, the children of the maidservants never spoke in front of their brothers out of respect. So they had never wanted to punish Joseph. From the other sons of Leah, only Shimon and Levi are the ones. There were only four that were outgoing and that were always speaking up. One is Reuben, the second is Shimon, the third is Levi, and the fourth is Yehuda. The other two children of Leah weren't always speaking up. That's why Reuben is the one who offered to guarantee Benjamin later on when they go out when they go down to Egypt. When Benjamin is found to be a thief, Judah is the one who speaks. There were only four. The ones who actually spoke and demanded to kill Joseph and sell him are Shimon and Levi, those two men. That's why Joseph is arresting Shimon, because he was afraid these two men can destroy the entire country. Says the Rebbe, Jacob, when he discovers that what they did to Joseph, and obviously it was unjustified, It was out of being zealot for no purpose other than just being a hothead and being very quick. That's why he's cursing them. Now it was found out to go retroactively that the way they acted towards the town wasn't because they actually did what was right, but just because they are hotheads. And therefore, he says, I don't want my name to be mentioned next to them. I don't want to be blessing them. I want to issue only curses to them, because at this point we discover that what they have done in earlier a stage of their life was also unacceptable and should have been done. And that's why the first time when they said to him, we don't want our sister to be like a harlot, he accepts it. But after the experience of Joseph being sold, being thrown into a pit and sold as a slave, Jacob turned to those two men and he says to them, your behavior is totally unacceptable. And I should tell you that until this very day, anyone who is from the tribe of Levi is known as a very harsh, hot-headed person. Elijah the prophet was a Kohen, was a priest. He comes from the tribe of Levi, and we know that he was a very zealot person. He was very easy to anger. We read in his stories that he was only very angry. Even today, when I grew up, when I would deal with someone as a Kohen, my father would say to me, don't start up with this guy, don't argue with him because he's a Kohen. Meaning he comes from the tribe of Levi, and they are very zealot, they're very quick to anger, they have a very short fuse, so to say, and you gotta be very respectful of them. That's the end of our discussion. We have another topic in this same story about honoring your father and mother. Did they honor their father and mother by the way they acted or not? But that we can leave for another time. So I want to wish everyone Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. we'll have services, and Saturday morning, Shabbat morning at 10 o'clock and 9:30 you'll study the Torah portion again, and everyone is invited if the conditions allow you. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.